In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, Paul says to the church in Thessalonica that they should pray without ceasing, pray continuously, pray nonstop. His advice is a little hyperbolic, obviously, and also directly opposed to the title of our book, which is Never Pray Again, also hyperbolic. You can't pray without ceasing and never pray again at the same time. Those two things are opposed to each other. So are we contradicting Paul here? Are we saying that you should do the opposite of Paul? Yes, in this sense. Paul advises that you should pray without ceasing. And if prayer is understood the way that it is most popularly represented in our culture as basically words said either aloud or internally to a divine entity, a transcendent God out there who's presumably listening in and responding to your prayer in some way, or not responding as God chooses and seems to do most of the time, then that kind of prayer is not only impossible to do ceaselessly, but would be undesirable to even attempt to do ceaselessly. It would consume all of your time. You wouldn't have time for eating or sleeping or spending time with friends or working or doing anything that makes life worth living. If you were to attempt to pray ceaselessly in this fashion, it would be horribly self-destructive. It would be terrible advice, which I strongly urge you not to follow. Therefore, most people, when interpreting this passage from Paul, try to put some other different spin on the word or meaning of prayer here. They try to say that he means some kind of continual internal communion with God going on even when we're not aware of it, even when we're sleeping or we're otherwise occupied and not paying attention to it. In which case, it's indistinguishable from not having that internal communion with God. It's just sort of continually going on, whether you even know it or not. And so I don't find that reading particularly persuasive. Or they want to interpret prayer here as some form of lived action, as in prayer meaning doing nice things for other people, also doing everything else that you ever do that wouldn't normally be considered prayer, but those things are considered prayer in this case because Paul is here talking about prayer in that way. And if that's the case, then it's indistinguishable from advice to go on living your life as normal, as exactly as you already are doing it, and just calling all of the things that you're normally doing prayer anyway. So for all of those reasons, I think that our advice to never pray again is more cogent, more sound, and if you read our book, you'll see why the things we recommend you do in place of prayer would be exactly the things that Paul would actually want you to do instead of wasting your time trying to pray without ceasing.
Oh, Steve.